just recently in Vancouver for a ministers association meeting, and I was
Yes,
wondering,
that's
well, I was
correct.
wondering how that went.
Oh, it went really, really well. There was seven of us there. One of the ministers actually got sick just before leaving, Hashimoto Sensei from Toronto. But we all gathered. Um, we do this twice annually. So once with the annual general meeting in April, and then once in the fall. And it happened to be in Steveston. We happened to go to the internment camp in Tashmi. There's a museum there that this fellow had set up on his own. And it was just an amazing sight to see the museum. But while we were there, this family from a place called Kamloops came and they brought something for the museum. And that was a prisoner of war jacket worn by their father in in a prisoner of war camp in Ontario. And so this prisoner of war camp jacket was like a denim type jacket. On the back of it has a red circle, right? And originally, when the Japanese went to the prisoner of war camp, they thought, "Oh, how nice! There's symbolizing the rising sun and the red." And then they found out, well, no, everybody's has a red circle on the back. Why is that? And it's for the guards to be able to shoot the red target. And so this fellow who, when he left the camp, essentially stole the jacket because it was property of the federal government. And we believe it might be the only one in existence. So this family was coming to donate this jacket and hat. Similarly, it had a stripe, a red stripe on the hat too. And we believe it could be wrong, but we believe it's probably one of the very few jackets left in existence. So the family left it with this museum. It was an amazing occasion to be there when they donated it. We had a service together with the family and with the people in the museum. There was a few people visiting as well. So it was quite an amazing experience.
Wow, yeah, that's it- not just to be somewhere where a family or someone is bringing a, like a vestment or something, like bring some sort of thing to bring to a museum for the museum to have. Like that's an occasion of on its own, but then to have this very significant what more or less one of a kind or rare item being brought in, and it being so charged and being so important of an item, like to have to be present for that, on top of also just being there to create some space for to memorialize that event,
Yep.
and to be there with the family for that. It must have been extremely powerful.
Yeah, it
Um,
was. In addition to the jacket, they also brought their father and mother's nenju, their uh, onenju beads, which was quite amazing. So they obviously were quite Buddhist, and they were in the internment camp in Tashmi. So that's why they brought it there to that museum in particular.
wow. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, thank you for, just for being present at such a momentous thing, but also, I mean, it sounds like you are someone that is offering some healing ceremony and some resources for people when they're kind of bringing up some extremely intense historical elements of their family history or lived history. And I think it's really wonderful that you help kind of facilitate that space for them. Have you been visiting other internment sites and other museums that are dedicated to that?
I haven't. So last summer, uh, yeah, it was last summer. We actually tried to get to New Denver. So there's another internment museum um, that I think is actually sponsored by the provincial government. But anyway, so it's a larger museum in New Denver. We had planned to drive through there, visited with my nephew, but unfortunately there was a bunch of forest fires. And so all of the highways in at the museum itself was closed because of they had to evacuate the area because of the forest fires, and the roads in were all closed as well. So even though we had intentions to go see it, we never got an opportunity to go in to see it. So we'll probably go next summer.
Yeah, when things are a little safer and everything like that, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, and I wanted to mention too, because like just with your work with the Buddhist Temple of Southern Alberta, I've looked at the website, which is I want to get into it, but it's a really great resource for someone that wants to learn a little bit more about Jodo Shinshu, and also just like this the the Butsudan and like there's so many really wonderful things that you include on the website just for anyone that's interested in understanding a little bit more about Jodo Shinshu, but also just understanding a little bit more about the history of your temple and the what your
Mhm.
temple offers. But within the context of the history of the temple, I understand that it has a storied nature to it because it is the amalgamation of multiple temples. And I think one of them being one of the earlier ones being the Raymond Buddhist Church of Southern
Mhm.
Alberta, which was founded in 1929.
That's
And
correct.
it's the church that temple was rooted deep within Alberta's history. And I was just wondering if what your familiarity with that is, and if you wouldn't mind just sharing some of that, just because it seems like where the Buddhist Temple of Southern Alberta is and what it has done is pretty significant to the Buddhist community of Canada, but also just of like the history of Alberta.
So the Raymond Temple was built in 1929. It was actually not built as a Buddhist temple, but it was actually a Mormon schoolhouse and a meeting center. So the LDS Church had actually built it, and they no longer had a purpose for it. So the Buddhist congregation, who was present in Raymond at the time, purchased it and refurbished it, sort of thing. It was actually designated as the Alberta Historic Land Site or a historic building, um, and uh, and it continued to operate until 2006, 2007 as a Buddhist temple. My family has a deep background to it. My father was a minister in New Westminster when the war broke out. So he came to Canada in the 1930s. And then when the war broke out, um, people of Nikkei origin were given a choice in Canada. So they could go to the internment camps, like places like Tashme and New Denver and all these places. Or if they went east of the Rockies, they could go to a smaller community and not be in a camp. So my grandfather, being a Buddhist minister, and there only being one Buddhist temple east of the Rockies, decided he was going to go to Raymond, and he brought my father and his four other children, his wife, to Raymond. So he was there in 1942, or beginning. The family actually had to work on a sugar beet farm. That was the deal. So all of the families worked on sugar beet farms around Lethbridge, not in Lethbridge. They weren't allowed to settle in Lethbridge, and then he became the active minister at the Raymond Buddhist Temple. There was another minister by the name of Kamura Sensei, who was in Raymond up until 1940. And then he was planning to go back to Japan, but ended up in the West Coast. I can't remember where. But then during the war, when they had to make a decision about internment, he also came back to Raymond. And he subsequently ended up in a place called Picture Butte, just north of Lethbridge, a smaller community. So my father grew up, spent 5 or 6 years of his life living in the temple. Um, so they actually had sort of an apartment style building as part of the temple. And so they actually lived in that temple. They ran something called the kobai, which is a Japanese food store, basically. And at the time, because of the post-war conditions, the congregation really couldn't afford to pay the minister's salary. So um, the minister basically supported themselves by running these stores. And so I remember my father talking about the kobai and running in there and wanting to sort of take the chocolate bars that were there or the pop that were there and not being able to because it was part of the inventory for the temple. But he also told me recollections of him and his younger brother actually stayed in a room in the basement. And the basement of the Raymond Temple, even today, is not cemented. It's actually a dirt floor. And so he remembers actually his bedroom having a dirt floor. Yeah.
Wow, that is I mean, yeah, very much so a part of the shaping of Alberta's history and such a unique and difficult experience. It sounds like. I mean, to upend your life, go across, deal with the many factors of what internment had been doing, and then to settle to live, uh, to have your room have dirt floors in a building, and to be operated like living your life also within the temple grounds all that time. Sounds like such a huge adjustment. Was there a larger diasporic community that was in Lethbridge when that was all happening?
Yeah, so Raymond, around Lethbridge. So there's one spot was Raymond and another spot called Hardyville, which is now the north side of Lethbridge. But those two communities actually had quite a few pioneers from Japan. So Okinawa was Hardyville, mostly miners, because there was a coal mine there. And so they came from Okinawa. And then Raymond attracted farmers from mostly Kagoshima. And so it was those pioneers that came in the early 1900s and settled farms, bought land. So there was a group of around 800 pioneer Japanese members who were around Lethbridge before the war broke out. And then with the internment, there was an additional 2,800 Japanese Canadians that were brought from the coast and settled into southern Alberta. So places like Picture Butte, um, Raymond, Tabor, Coaldale, all built new Buddhist churches because of the internment or the migration of forced evacuees into southern Alberta. Yeah, so it's pretty cool to see that history. And so the Buddhist Temple of Southern Alberta became an amalgamation of 6 of those temples. As those temples declined in membership as the membership got older, and also because the um, buildings were all getting pretty old, needed quite a bit of repair. It was hard for those congregations to figure out how they were going to fix them up and maintain them. And so a decision was made in 2006 that we would start an amalgamation process. And we formally opened this temple in 2009. So it's been 16 years now.
And is the current Buddhist Temple of Southern Alberta, is it on the grounds that are from a former temple name, or is this like a new space that's built on a new
No,
space?
it's a new space. In fact, we're in a bit of an industrial area on the east side of Lethbridge. And they specifically bought that land because it was closer to 2 of the towns, so Tabor and Coaldale, being east of Lethbridge. It would be easier for those congregation members to drive in. In fact, from the town of Coaldale to our temple, and from the west side of Lethbridge to our temple, it's actually faster to get from Coaldale to our temple than it is the west side. So it was purposely done that way. Also, everybody had history with their own temples, right? Their parents or grandparents or ancestors, you know, built these temples or at least, purchased them. And there was a lot of pride in that. And there was one thought that the newest temple in Lethbridge, the Hompa Temple, could be the site of the amalgamation. But it was quickly decided that we should build anew, that we should find a new location that was easier for the people on the east side of southern Alberta to get to. And even from Raymond, actually, it's pretty quick. It only takes about 15 to 20 minutes from Raymond to get into our temple.
When it came to the amalgamation of all these different temples coming together, I'd imagine just like how you were saying, like there was that location element too, which is important because it just made traffic to the temple a little bit easier. And then also too, it kind of helped deal with anyone that might have some allegiances or some nostalgia or anything else, like some like otherwise connection to their temple, and so it could create a kind of like a an issue with just with the emotional impact of that transition
Sure.
happening on the same grounds. But when it came to the putting the materials into the new temple,
Mhm.
altar spaces, the different visual components, and the uh, all of the things that go inside, was that an amalgamation when you would put things into, like taking things from other temples into that, or was it all brand new items?
No, so it was an amalgamation. So, for example, our altar or our Butsudan is it really very much an amalgamation of different components from different temples, and we did that on purpose. the committee that actually brought the amalgamation process together represented all of the temples that joined together. And we felt it was really important to have components of the altar from each of the temples as part of our main temple. The interesting thing is that, so what do you do with 5 other altars that you don't have a place for? So we put the Hompa main shrine into our Dharma classroom, so that's easy. And then the Lethbridge North side main Amida statue was the nicest and the newest, so we put that into our Butsudan or Naijin. But we made sure that there was components from every temple, and then the remaining altars actually got donated to 3 museums around Alberta. So the Glenmore Museum in Calgary got one of them. The Galt Museum in Lethbridge, of course, got one of them. And the Provincial Museum in Edmonton got one of them. And then the last one actually ended up in Minneapolis for a new congregation that was, it's not a Jodo Shinshu temple. I think it might be Jodo Shu, but anyways, they found out that we had an extra shrine altar. And so we ended up, they ended up coming up and actually picking up with a truck.
Wow. Well, that really does kind of hit that definition of amalgamation when you have so many components from different temples within the new building, within the new structure.
I feel very lucky as a minister because we really, I mean, what they did, of course, was they took the best components of each of the altars. So it ended up being it's a very, very nice altar. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I haven't seen it personally in person. However, there's a really wonderful video via the Buddhist Temple of Southern Alberta's website that is, I think it's on Vimeo, and it's this great kind of like welcome in video with like some little like touches of like this is where this is where the Dharma talks happen, but it's done in this like very whimsical Wes Anderson-y style. And
Hey, that's very good that you picked that up.
oh yeah.
So the 2 young men who produced that video, one actually has a production company, but he's a member of our temple. And he said, well, we want this for young people, right? We don't, that's the demographic that we're going after. So what kind of would suit their tastes? And my wife and I are huge Wes Anderson fans. So we said, well, how about doing something like in that style? And he just took off with it. And it was a lot of fun to make. We had a great time doing it. And we get a fair bit of comments on it when people go on our website or our Facebook page. They see it and they think it's actually quite funny. But the people who know Wes Anderson say, oh, yeah, that's in the style of Wes Anderson.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it really is in the framing and the cinematography, but also too, I mean, just like the sweep edits or like where the camera kind of twists and turns. But at the same time, it's hyper stylized, and I mean that in a great way. But it as a result, it engages you in a different way, and I think like as far as its target of appealing to maybe younger audiences or whatever, it certainly works because it just kind of it brings you in a way that feels very contemporary, even though the grounds might be newer than the story temples around it. However, it kind of brings this temple into a very contemporary space and makes it feel very accessible and approachable. So I'm just very grateful for the video because it really it made even like the sense of community feel a little bit like right here and now, because Wes Anderson's so big right now too. So I really was very appreciative of that, and also too just media wise. And I would like to get into this with you because there's, as far as what the Buddhist Temple of Southern Alberta does, it is really good about having resources available for people that want to know more, and through video, but also maybe through written pieces as well, and of course like newsletters. But there's also the podcast. Was there a time when the community was kind of reflecting on itself and deciding that it wanted to be a little bit more upfront about not just what the Buddhist Temple of Southern Alberta is all about, but also Jodo Shinshu, and just being a little bit more open and out there than they were before?
Yeah, so the podcast idea came about with myself and one of the younger members, and we were talking about, well, how do we reach out to maybe a community that doesn't necessarily have access to Jodo Shinshu Buddhism or Buddhism in general. And so 2019 is actually when we started it, so just before COVID. And we did a few episodes, but then during COVID, of course, it was really hard to get here. We felt that people were sort of missing the gatherings and all that. And so we thought, well, let's put together and be more consistent about getting the podcast out. We haven't been active in the last year, so kind of as COVID died down and the need for that um, other resource sort of died down a little bit. We haven't been as active in producing podcasts. It's hopefully something that we'll get back to, but we've had a lot of fun with it. And the young fellow one of the young fellows who helped produce that video that you talked about, our welcome video, is all on the podcast with me, Arjun Gill. And Arjun does the editing, which is great because we don't have those skills, or I don't have those skills.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wonderful thing, and for anyone that's interested, that is a Buddhist Life podcast, and you can find that on the website www.thebtsa.com. Yeah, no, it's a wonderful thing, but you also have like instructional videos too. Like you have the Oshoko best practices basically for regular service when it comes to approaching the Butsudan or the Naiji. You have Shotsuki
Shotsuki,
service,
yeah.
Shotsuki, and
That's our monthly memorial service. Yeah.
and as well as the funeral service as well.
Yeah.
It's just great. It's just great that you have that, because then I feel like sometimes with people that are going into new spaces, especially ones that are spaces that are weighted with spirituality or religiosity, or whatever it is, there's a seriousness, and people don't want to be offensive, people don't want to misstep, people don't want to say the wrong thing. And I mean, not only is the Buddhist temple of Southern Alberta something that is trying to be accessible and welcoming and come on in, but it also shows you, but by the way, if you're curious and if you're worried about doing the wrong thing, like, here is how to do it. And it's just really smart. So I'm just
Oh,
really appreciative of you guys doing that. It's really cool. Um, and when it comes to like your personal experience, because I know that we would talked about your family history, um, but so you have grandfather and father that were both ministers, it sounds like.
mhm.
And then
Yes.
one of your brothers also is a minister. And I believe Grant, I believe he was a minister maybe before you were a minister,
Oh, yes,
uh,
way before.
way
So
before.
he's had a career as a minister. He's been a minister for over 30 years now. He's actually the minister at the Steveston Buddhist Temple on the West Coast, basically right by Vancouver and Richmond. And prior to that, he was in Toronto for a number of years. So basically, he graduated from University of Alberta and then went to Japan to study to become a minister. And he's been a minister ever since. Mm.
And what is that like for you? Because I know that you I listened to a little bit of a talk that you were giving at some point recently, and you were kind of going over briefly your family history and your engagement. And I think that you grew up more or less on more so the side of like, I grew up in a temple community in a temple household, and I'm just kind of maybe not connected to it in the same way as maybe my parents are or something like that. And so you had a little bit more distance from it, and now here you are sharing ministerial duties in the sense of being ministers, though at different temples with a brother. Do you feel like that has done interesting things to your sense of connection with each other? Does it do something different with just like how you observe ministers and yourself as a minister within your various communities?
Well, for sure. So he's a younger brother. He's younger than me by 3 years. And yet, as I was going through my training and now that I'm a minister, I go to him for advice all the time. He's much more versed. So he studied in Japan, and he's much more versed in terms of the Japanese and the Japanese culture. So I'm constantly turning to him for advice. But even when it comes to rituals and things of that nature, he has a better understanding, a deeper understanding for sure. And he's been doing it for 35 years. So, um, he's got a lot to teach me. which is an interesting change in dynamic, right? He's my younger brother. We used to call him Chibi, right? So like the little runt, and and yet as I've become a minister, he's certainly helped me a great deal. My family history is interesting in that my mother comes from a temple family in Kyoto, and my cousins run that temple currently. But they would be the 19th generation of ministers in that temple. So it's like a family temple in the middle of Kyoto. And then my father's side, their temple is actually in Tokyo, fairly close to Tsukiji Honganji. And again, again, so it'd be second or third cousins that are running it, but they're 14th generation ministers, 14th or 15th now. So, but having said that, I was never really that interested in the religious aspect of Buddhism. So I would help at the temple. I was the temple president for the BTSA shortly after they formed. I would do all those duties, but really didn't understand really the teachings, number one, and really wasn't into it. I was a physician, and and then as I became the president, I realized, oh, I should learn a little bit more about Buddhism, Jodo Shinshu and Buddhism, because people would come up to me all the time, new members, new people in the temple, and they say, well, what is that? Why do you do this? And my pat answer was, well, go ask the minister, right? Go ask Izumi Sensei because he knows all the answers. I don't know any of these things. And so he sort of nudged me and said, well, maybe you should find out a little more about this. So I took a course called the Correspondence Course on Jodo Shinshu Buddhism. And I thought I was doing it out of duty, more or less, learn stuff so I can be a good president. And I found it fascinating. I found the information and the content way deeper than I thought it would be. So after taking that, the person who was my preceptor in that course said, well, why don't you think about going a little further and becoming an assistant minister, do Tokudo? And I thought, well, I'm not sure. I was busy as a physician, but I thought, oh, maybe okay. It's not going to be too painful. So I went ahead and did that, and also found that process to be very, very life-changing. We had a trip to India in 2016. One of the people from Vancouver actually led that trip. And we were in a place called Bodh Gaya. So that's where the Buddha got enlightened. And many of us felt this, but we had a profound connection with not just Jodo Shinshu Buddhists, but Buddhists from around the world. And it was just an amazing thing. And I think that visit actually changed my life into thinking about, well, maybe you should think about this more deeply, or maybe you should think about incorporating it into your life. And so my father passed away before I even started on this journey. He passed away in 2014. So he has no idea, or he had no idea that I would even do this. And he probably would have thought, that, oh, Roland's the last person in the world that would go along this path. But anyways, so it ended up being that way. So
Yeah. And I think it's a wonderful thing that there's like you remained involved, you were helping the way that you wanted to help, but you had maybe other interests, or you had a career that you were attending to, and that kept you busy enough, and yet you still contributed. You contributed to the temple. You offered your administrative help by being of service as the president. And when you got that nudge to take that correspondence course, or to dive a little bit deeper into understanding what Jodo Shinshu is all about, I was just wondering, like, what was the type of thing that pulled you in? Was there a philosophical element? Was there a oh, that's what everyone's been saying all this time? That was I was getting maybe hearing these Dharma talks, all these Dharma talks started making sense a little bit more to me in a certain way. I was just curious, like, what was the first kind of, more or less, the first kind of fascinating thing that brought you in?
well, I think it was actually learning more about Shinran's life. Like, he's the founder of our school of Buddhism, Shinran Shonin, lived about 850 years ago. But listening to sort of his struggles and how he led a very difficult life. He was exiled. He had to live in rural Japan. So listening to his struggles, and yet listening to his profound, or reading about his understanding of Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, or Buddhism in general. Um, and then finding out, because I really didn't understand this, what a novel approach to Pure Land Buddhism that he had. Like, he sort of really turned Pure Land Buddhism on its head in some ways, really brought some novel notions and ideas and philosophies into Buddhism. And I had really no idea about um, what a sort of a rebel, a revolutionary he was. And so finding out about that was really, really very interesting for me. And I mean, I think it's one of those things where you hear about all this stuff, as a kid, growing up, and you don't really pay that much attention to it, or you think it's hokey or it's not that meaningful in your life. And yet, when you hear, I guess, a deeper version of it, or I guess, you get to read about it and think about it more carefully. Yeah, I was really surprised at how meaningful it was and how important it was. I just found it interesting. I mean, I was just fascinated by it, and partly it's because you partly know some of it, but you don't know all of it, and so learning the deeper meanings of things, trying to understand things a little bit more. It kind of drew me in. I was surprised, and I think my family was surprised that that would happen to me. So, anyways.
Mm. Yeah. And when it came to because yeah, you did Tokudo, and then you did in, let me try to find the year, in 2022 you did Kyoshi. I was wondering what kind of drove you to want to go beyond being a minister's assistant, and you wanted to really start taking more of more of a leadership capacity.
Well, I think, as you do Tokudo, then, well, I had an ongoing interest to continue to study. So that was one thing, right? And so, I mean, we're, I was extremely fortunate that I could actually continue to study and learn about other things and deeper understandings about Buddhism. Lots of people who I was going through Tokudo with, either, fellow travelers on the path, like fellow students, but as well as several of the teachers really gave me a nudge saying, you should, think about a career. At the time, uh, I was pretty busy as a physician. Um, but with some nudges, I said, okay, well, maybe I'll do work as a physician part-time and study part-time. So that's what I did the last 3 years of my medical career, actually. Um, One of the other things that was really central or helpful in my eventually deciding to become a minister was something that I didn't, I sort of realized and recognized at the end of my medical career. But it was something that I really didn't think about deeply until sort of as I was coming to the end of my medical career. And that was, I had an opportunity. My father was a minister, of course, and he would visit people, family, friends, and people that we would knew from the congregation as they were on their deathbed, right? So, and on several occasions, he asked me to accompany, as his kids, if he had to drive to rural Alberta, for example, we would, meet with him and then drive him and visit with that person, and, and then drive him back home, whatever. And there was a couple of instances that really moved me in that. So I was a geriatrician, looked after seniors, and a fair bit of that was palliative care. Like, I was actually a part-time palliative care physician as well. And I met with a couple of people, and one gentleman in particular who was dying from cancer, and he was, by all marks of what we call quality of life measures, having the worst possible end to his life. Um, so pain, couldn't eat, couldn't stand anymore, had to have his family do all of his, functions, all that kind of stuff. Um, so the only things he had going for him was his family support, which was amazing. But in every other way that you could measure his quality of life, it was bad. Like, it was really bad. And yet he had this profound sense of peace about him. And I found, well, what is that? Like, how can that be? How can this man be and then the other thing that was amazing to me was he really looked forward to my father coming to visit with him, right? So he would, write back and forth or call him, and talk about, well, when can you get up here next? And because my father was in Calgary and this gentleman was just outside of Edmonton. And so we would make these visits and he would just be so pleased with the visits that my father would make. And they would do things like read through scriptures, but chant together, stuff like that. And that seemed to bring him an immense sense of peace. And so it dawned on me later that his spiritual understanding and spiritual, uh, yeah, trumped everything else in terms of his sense of being. Uh, that he could be going through this miserable into his life, and yet he was really at peace and calm and grateful, despite it all, because of his spiritual understanding. And so, to me, that made me realize that that spiritual path can trump everything else. That you might be going through the worst time in your life, but if you have a deep spiritual path, that can trump everything else. And so I saw lots of people suffering as a physician, and there was lots of times when we thought, well, there's really not much else we can do for this person. And yet, being a spiritual guide or a fellow traveler, I guess would be a better way to say it, really can help more so than even medicine can. So I sort of reflected on that after my father passed away, and that was one of the things that said, maybe I should study this more, understand this more.
Hmm. And I'm really grateful that you had that experience. Though it made the person that you were attending to with your father. I mean, it sounds like it was a really tragically uncomfortable and by all other accounts miserable um, end of life experience. However, there's this wonderful element that you're highlighting, which is that there was this like spiritual element that was making that not just survivable, but just kind of even there was like a calmness and a balance and a peace to it that arrived
Mm-hmm.
out of it. This is really very important. I'm glad that, that you had that experience. And when it comes to as you were um, in that stage of your work as a physician within geriatric medicine, did you start to kind of see as you were ingesting more study and more teachings that were maybe a little bit deeper or a little bit deeper engagement with those materials? How about that, where you started to kind of see it influence how you approached your patient relationship, and yeah, I'm just kind of curious if you started to kind of see elements of Jodo Shinshu kind of emerging out as you were approaching your work.
Yeah, I think there was always a little bit of those components. I mean, I grew up in a Jodo Shinshu family with a minister as a father. And so, yeah, whether I was conscious of it or not, I think I always had a little bit more of that philosophy and thought behind how I would look after people. Geriatric medicine is a very holistic style of medicine, anyways. So, I mean, and I think part of my career choice was based upon my upbringing as well. But so I think that it was always there, but um, I definitely found, particularly in the last 4 years or so of my practice, that that became a much more important element. I mean, in geriatric medicine, we often talk about the fact that we don't have any cures, right? We don't have any cures for old age. We don't have any cures for dementia. So it's caring for the individuals that's much more important in geriatric medicine, not the cures. Um, and I think that's very consistent with Jodo Shinshu and Buddhistic thought and philosophy. So I think it was always there to a certain extent, but it certainly grew in intensity and became more important, particularly in the last 4 years of my practice. Yeah.
Thank you for offering that, because that perspective is really helpful for me, just in understanding the nature of geriatric medicine as being a little bit more holistic, a little bit more being with the transition or like of into older age or into an end of life stages. So thank you for helping me understand that. And then uh, as you, I'd imagine now that you are the minister of the Buddhist Temple of Southern Alberta, more of your time is now dedicated to that. I believe that you are no longer in your operating your practice.
That's right.
It's
Actually, I retired as a physician in 22. So the year that I became a full-fledged minister and started helping here at the temple is when I retired formally. Yeah.
gotcha. How has that experience been now, where you were putting down a practice that has or transitioning away from a practice that you've spent so much time, professional time in, and now you are having this kind of second career, second uh, engagement with community members and with just your own personal practice. How have you been experiencing your role as a minister?
So I must say there are components of my previous professional life that I miss a lot, particularly interactions with both the patients and the staff that I worked with. I worked with an amazing group of nurses and um, others, physios, all those kinds of team members, spiritual care leaders. Um, so I miss those components for sure. But in terms of a career, I really found this career as a minister to be very fulfilling. Um, I have a bit of a unique situation in that the congregation that I'm part of saw me grow up as a child, right? So they've seen me from when I was a baby. And so, in some ways, many of the senior members of the temple are like my uncles and aunts. In fact, there are several members who I'm not related to that I still call uncle and aunt. And if you come to our congregation, almost no one calls me Roland sensei or Reverend Ikuta. It's always Roland, right? Because they've known me since I was a child and known me as Roland. So I, almost find it weird when someone says Ikuta Sensei and I'm looking around, where's my dad, type thing. Um, but so I'm in a very fortunate situation to be with a congregation that's extremely supportive, you know, very supportive of what I've been trying to do. And in many ways, they're sort of carrying me through this experience. Very much so. So I found it extremely fulfilling, a lot of fun. We've been having a lot of fun at our temple. Um, and they come up with some really, really novel and good ideas that we were able to carry forward and make happen. And that's just been a lot of fun. One of the examples that I'm most proud is if, so our temples, particularly in Lethbridge, have had a very much declining membership in terms of kids. So our Dharma classroom at the BTSA when we first formed may have had 5 Dharma kids attending, and sometimes it would be no kids at our church services. So we tried to figure out how we're going to turn that around, and we decided that once a month we're going to dedicate the Sunday service to a family service, not just kids, but families. And so on the 4th Sunday of each month, we try to invite as many families as possible with the young kids. We have a much shorter service, and the service is very interactive. So when we chant, for example, all the kids get to drum on drums or cymbals or something else. We do a very, very short Dharma talk, and then we do activities geared towards families, not just kids. So family related activities, for example, the month of September, we talked about appreciating the harvest. And so we have a couple of apple trees on our temple ground. And so the kids got to pick some apples, peel them, and make apple crisp to take home to their families. And the entire families, not just the mom and dads and the kids, but we even had many of the seniors, the grandparents actually participating in making those. And it's been just amazing to see, at that service, the last service in September, we had like 17, 18 kids, a whole bunch of new families come out. So it's been really rewarding to see some ideas that, I had part of the contribution to that, but a greater part of it came from this group, a committee that we formed. And so seeing some of those efforts come to fruition and being helpful in terms of growing the Sangha. So that's, when you have successes like that, it's easy to be enthusiastic. And when you have people who are supporting you the whole way and coming up with these ideas and making them happen, and then, I can participate in that, it's been amazing.
Yeah, I think that that's a wonderful thing where you're trying to you're noticing the trend. If you're seeing less people show up in the Dharma class, you're kind of like, well, what if we open things up a little bit more, and maybe if we just did services for kids, all those parents that have newborns or something like that, then they don't feel like they can participate in the same way, and so they'll hold back, and then that reduces that number of person that could be otherwise showing up, and so you opening up to families. So it's like, well, families, might as well bring my uncle this time, or this I might as well bring my roommate who I'm really close with, and we can all just be together in this space. I think it's a really um, wonderful community-based way of celebrating the community, but also of attracting more people and creating more space for people. And this is something I wanted to talk about like a little bit later, but I feel like now might be a good time to talk about it because in October, which is now, you have a couple of events that are coming up. You have a fall chow mein supper Sunday, which is like a takeout operation, I believe, and that happens on October 19th. And there's these pictures, and there was also a really helpful video about making the noodles themselves.
Mm,
Uh,
mm.
I was just wanting to know a little bit more about this. It seems like a tradition. At least it's happened at least one other year than this. So I was just wondering what the fall chow mein supper means for your community and how it's been going.
So it's our major fundraisers. I think most temples in Canada do a chow mein supper at one point or another. So all of the amalgamating temples used to have chow mein suppers. And so, for example, Raymond would have one in September, and our home bus temple would have one. So when we came together, it became natural that we should continue with it. A bit of the controversy is, well, whose chow mein recipe do you follow, right? Do you follow Raymond's? Do you follow? And so we ended up amalgamating and doing bits of each. But that was a point of contention with a lot of the ladies. Um, but it's a supper that we have in October. We sometimes have it twice a year, sometimes once a year. This year we're serving 2,130 meals. They're all takeout. And it's amazing the volunteer force that we get in to help prepare these meals. So it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then all the meals go out Sunday between 12:30 and 4:30, I think it is. So we get 2,100 meals, over 2,100 meals out in that period of time. Um, More so, I mean, it is a big fundraiser for us, so it, generates a lot of revenue for our temple to keep it going. But more than that, I think it's an opportunity for our Sangha members, our community, our Sangha, a congregation to work together. And I mean, people, our volunteers actually, I mean, it's a lot of work. There's no doubt in denying that, but people have a lot of fun at it. If you come into the temple during chow mein supper time, people talk about just the buzz and the energy that everybody gets from it. And even though it's exhausting, everybody's just so happy with one, the end product, two, the fact that it's like a service to the community that, that we can provide. But three, it's just an opportunity to work together for a common goal. So it's just amazing. And I think part of it, and something that I've been trying to focus on, is it's in some ways respecting our ancestors, like our grandparents and our uncles and aunts and our parents who all, all of them made sort of this tradition happen. And and in some ways they were picky about making sure that the quality was just right, and it was a point of pride for them. And to be able to continue to follow in that tradition, I think is really meaningful to a lot of the families and the people who volunteer. We have many non-temple members who volunteer, and they just come because they think it's just a great time. In fact, that's how we ended up gaining some temple members. People from the community would come and volunteer, and they go, "Oh, this is a lot of fun. This is an amazing place." And then they said, "Well, what's this Buddhism all about?" One of the things that we've been trying to do is in trying to incorporate a little bit of Buddhist teachings into each one of our work days. So I'll do a mini Dharma talk at the lunch, and we're always making sure that we say, have a meal meditation. So we're trying to slowly, and by small increments, include aspects of Buddhism into these 3 very busy days.
Certainly. And I think even that video of the men making, there is the there are those kind of quality. There's like a narration that offers a little bit more about that Dharma element over some video of these specialized machines that you have that look like they've been through a couple of supper preparations and
Several decades.
yes. But they look for real, and there's just like it's really beautifully shot. There's just so many different elements there, and you could see how repetitive the work is, and labor intensive the work is, and yet at all these varying stages of the prep that goes into making those noodles, uh there's this perspective that you could put on it of a Dharma lesson, which is just really, it's
Mhm.
just really cool to see. And so I'm glad to hear that this is an event that's so fun that volunteers that are otherwise official members of the temple find themselves gravitating towards, just because this is a fun time, fun thing to do, fun thing to engage with. I think that's really wonderful. And then you have another thing coming up, October 23rd and 24th, which is the Ikigomi event, which is like a haunted hospital scavenger hunt. I want to know a little bit more about that because it sounds like a pretty unique Halloweeny kind of thing.
Yeah, so it's definitely geared around Halloween. So we have a young adults group called the Ikigomi. It's a joint venture between our Nikkei Cultural Society, so our Japanese Canadian Association in Lethbridge, and the temple. Uh, they use the temple space, and many of them are actually members of the temple, but some are not. And they just like to have fun. And so one of the things that they did last year, which I attended, and it was just a hoot, is they have a haunted house. And so they decided this year they're going to do a haunted hospital theme. So I'm really curious to see how that comes about. But they use the entire temple. And it's kind of like you come in and they have scripts made up, and one of the things that we had to do, for example, was sort of like a haunted house, but also a scavenger hunt. So you had to find certain elements through the temple as you're being scared to death. It was just a hoot, and the young people who do it, put a lot of effort into it. And we have not just temple members; we have the public coming through it as well. I hope there's even more attendance this year as it gets better known and better advertised. Um, but our Ikigomi group have a lot of fun. So they have regular movie nights. They're actually they form one of our Toban groups or our working groups. So every month, a different working group looks after the temple, the services, the refreshments for the services. And the Ikigomi actually has formed one of those Toban groups. So they take their shares with a little bit of direction, but they've been wonderful. But they do cooking classes, they have fundraising events otherwise. So there's a really good group. They're mostly made of young adults, 16 to, well, probably the older members are in their early 30s, but it's a really fun group that we have going. They can have up to 80, 90 people attend some of their events. Um, they're trying to attract, so for example, university students, particularly the university students, foreign students who are here from Japan. We have a number of them in Southern Alberta, both going to the college and the university. And so we get a number of them out, but also third and fourth generation, well, I guess fourth and fifth generation Japanese Canadians who have ties to the temple. So they get a number of those kids that otherwise wouldn't have ever stepped into the temple, coming in and helping out and participating in those activities. So yeah, it's a really good group.
Wow, that's really impressive. I mean, like to have to have such a draw for, especially like something that was intentional, like trying to bring in new Sangha members, some younger Sangha members, and to have that, had to have a mechanism that is already so active and so on top of it, and to bring in other people and to want to make it a thing and to put so much effort into things like a haunted house, or like making sure that they're on top of refreshments after a service. It's really wonderful. I am curious, with your experience as a physician, if you're going to walk into that haunted hospital and have some, like, I don't think there's should be this much dry ice in a hospital, but
Yeah.
or whatever it is. uh
Yeah, yeah.
but I really, that does sound like a really wonderful thing. And it just sounds like that you have so many opportunities for people to engage that you can for sure imbue Dharma related contexts or perspectives onto, but also this is just fun for fun's sake, and it makes people feel like they're a part of something, which is just really excellent. I just had two more questions for you.
Sure.
One, the first one is promotion based. So, and I'll just go ahead and offer what those are that I have here. But this is just a time in case you have a cause or a foundation that you're a part of, or something that you've heard about that you want to share and get some eyes and ears on. I would love to hear about it. But just to go over it, the Buddhist Temple of Southern Alberta has a website, www.thebtsa.com. Upcoming, there's a fall chow mein supper Sunday, October 19th. That will be a takeout. And then there is the October 23rd, 24th Haunted Hospital Scavenger Hunt. And if you could participate in that, that does sound creepy and fun. But if there's anything else that you'd like to share, I would love to hear about it.
No, just I guess I'd like to highlight, as I talked about, the family services every fourth Sunday at 10:30. So we're always inviting new members and new families to come out to that. The other group that we actually started formalizing, and we've run a couple of events now, is what we call our Ochakai Club. So a lot of new immigrant ladies and their families are looking for a place to gather. And so we formed a group of them. We just had an initial couple of events where they have a space to come to, bring their kids, and they have an opportunity to be together and get some support. So the next event that they're doing in October, at the last weekend in October, is a cooking class together. So they're going to be making things like tonkatsu and things that are, I guess, a little bit more difficult, like all that deep frying and stuff like that at home isn't as fun. So they're going to come together and do some take-home meals for each other. So that's another group that we're just getting started, and looks like there's a need for. So we're really happy with that. I should point out that the the Ikigomi group, the young adults, is very much of their own making. So I mean, of course, I support them and try to do whatever I can, but they've really come up with all their own ideas, and it's all the work that they put in themselves. And so I think that they're having fun doing it, and it's also an opportunity to get together and feel like they belong to a group. And so I think that's important in this day and age, for sure.
Yeah, no, like, and that is such a beautiful quality to that, where it's just like people are just enthusiastic, and all you have to do is let them express their enthusiasm. I think that's just a really fantastic thing. And then my last question is, do you happen to have any advice for somebody who is walking their Buddhist path that you would have wanted to have heard earlier on in your path?
Um, so I think there are a number of resources that are available out there. I think that people are often hesitant to come into a new situation, like coming to our temple. We've talked to a lot of the newcomers who've joined and become members, but they say, that initial step is really difficult. Like walking into a building where there's a whole bunch of strangers, you don't know if they're doing animal sacrifices or whatever weird things. And like one lady who's become a regular member said, she came to the temple 6 times, drove to the front door, and could not step in for the first 6 times. It was only after the seventh time here that she actually managed to step into the front door. I'm going, well, that's kind of weird. You could see us and you could see that we're not wearing, weird things and not doing weird stuff. And she said, no, but you have to understand that it's really intimidating for a stranger to walk into a space like that where everything's going to feel different or new and so I think it's helpful to know that most of the Buddhist spaces that are available, that I know of, are very welcoming, right? So especially Jodo Shinshu temples, but I think all Buddhist temples are that way, very welcoming, that people don't have to feel intimidated by it. But there's also resources that people can go to learn more about Buddhism or Jodo Shinshu in particular. Um, if you want to get into it deeper, there is the correspondence courses, but there's lots of old Orange County Buddhist Temple has a phenomenal website with all these kinds of everyday Buddhism lessons. So there's so many resources out there now that we never had. Like, growing up, I mean, I'm not that old, but didn't have access to. So I think many of these ideas were not accessible or as easily accessible. So there's so many resources now that I think people can make themselves, familiar with the ideas behind Jodo Shinshu or general Buddhism. And if it's an area that sparks an interest, then they might have to take that step of, coming in. I do think that self-study is important, but I do think that the Sangha, the community that supports you in that spiritual path is so important. And so it might spark your curiosity, but then take the step to join a Sangha somewhere. It doesn't have to be Jodo Shinshu. It could be any community of like-minded people. But yeah, make yourself familiar with the topic and the ideas. And if it's something that interests you, then take the step to join a Sangha somewhere.
Yeah, that story that you shared of the person, 6 times going up to the door, seventh time, when they enter, is, I mean, yeah, like the way that the Buddhist Temple of Southern Alberta does it with the website, it really shows you what it's like on the inside, so you can kind of get an idea of it. So that makes that maybe it's the third time you show up, you
Yeah,
can walk
maybe a
in
little
just a
easier.
little bit
Who
a little
knows?
bit easier. You do, but you
Yeah.
certainly do. I mean, like it really does. As far as the website goes, and as far as what the general was it audience facing or front facing uh, way that the community, the Sangha reflects itself, it really does feel like there is this accessibility going on, which is just really helpful, I think. And then two, just curious because we talked about it a little bit, but the correspondence course, where is that available? Is that through an organization in particular?
Yeah, if you go through the Buddhist Churches of America website, it's available on that website. So there's links to it there. Uh, yeah, so, but there was a Kuahara sensei. I don't know if you know Kyonobu Kurahara. He's the minister at the Berkeley Temple, and he is also the head of the International Jodo Shinshu Center in San Francisco. Anyways, he is the coordinator of that program. But it's an amazing program. It's a 2-year program. You do monthly readings and then monthly writing reflections. Um, when I took it, I was amazed because I would write, like a 500-page essay after reading stuff, and I would get back more than that from my preceptors. They would write back pages to me about, my thought and helping me, and it's just an amazing learning opportunity. It's really the thing that sparked me into going along this path for sure.
Well, it's really great to hear that there is this relationship where, you show up and you do your work, and then there are people that are just as enthusiastic about the topic that will help you understand it further and all that. So you could really feel like you're engaging with the material deeply. That's wonderful. Well, Roland Sensei, thank you very much for speaking with
Oh
me.
no, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk and to meet you in person.
Yeah, yeah, no, I would love that. And maybe maybe at a haunted house or something like that at some point
Sure.
soon. But
You bet.